Lindsay, my co-chair, is also here. I'm Becky Bonifant. Lindsay and I are the co-chairs of the SEPAC here for Hamilton Wenham. For anybody who's kind of new to these meetings, new to the SEPAC, if you want to sign in, we'll add you to our email distribution. You have to opt into communicating with us. So they nicely do us the favor of sending out some district-wide communication, but we have far more that requires the opt-in. I guess that's it. We'll leave the most to Stacy, and Julie is going to be joining us a little late as well, and we're recording this for anyone that you know that might be interested in the content.
Yep. Yeah, thank you all for coming, and to the Hamilton Wenham camera for coming. And they said that it'll be available on Monday, so I'll post that out on different Facebook groups so that people know. But if you're talking to someone or know someone that had a question that wasn't able to be answered, they can, well, first see if it was answered on the Hamilton Wenham camera by watching the video, but then feel free to follow up with us, and we'll make sure that we were just talking to Stacey about potentially doing just some FAQ or something like that that can live more publicly on the website and start to capture the questions that people have.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you all for coming. The presentation for today is going to touch on some of the programming we have in district, and then we're going to talk about some of the requests I made for the FY21 budget. And then we'll leave questions for after. I will say I won't get into specific student questions just because of confidentiality. If you have any questions after as a side about a particular student question, then I'm happy to answer it after or have a conversation with you another time. So this is just a general overview. So I just want you to know who our office staff is, because a lot of you have probably spoken more with office staff or with coordinators than you have with me. So our office staff currently consists of Elaine Rogel, who is my immediate administrative assistant, and then Susan Hallinan, who supports the secondary for middle school and high school, and then Jennifer Guarino, who is new. We used to have Jennifer Hansen. She's moved into another office in the central office. And Jennifer Guarino has just started with us over the past few weeks. She supports the elementary level and pre-K, and then out-of-district documentation. And then our administrators in the department, besides myself, include Maureen Smith, who is the elementary special education coordinator. And is also the coordinator for special ed of the preschool program. And then Lindsay McGovern, who is our secondary special education coordinator and supports middle school and high school. We had previously had an out-of-district team chairperson as well, Sarah Meyer, who you may have met, who has supported out-of-district and some of the secondary meetings, but she's no longer working for us. So for the time being, if the out-of-district is falling on us as a group. So Student Services Department is the umbrella of my department, and Special Education is the largest portion of the Student Services Department. Within my department, I also support the English Language Education Program. It's a small program. We're a low incidence district. 504 accommodations are overseen by my department. However, the building administrators are the ones who facilitate the 504 meetings and evaluation for 504s. Counseling, some of you may have met Dr. Kristen Laszlo, our Director of Counseling. She oversees the school-wide district counselors at each level, and then I oversee her. We also have a nurse leader. Nursing falls under the Student Services Department as well. So Leah Stenkin is a nurse over at the high school, but she also supports nursing across the district. Home hospital tutoring falls under the Student Services Department. So for students who are out for an extended period of time due to medical concerns, can have tutoring. If they're in the hospital, we contract with the provider, or if they're home, we're able to support tutoring through a list of staff we have. Some of you may have participated in our CFC Early Childhood Partners program. So if previous it was Lisa Cheney moved on to the Education Department through DESE. Paige Mancini is our new coordinator. So if you're going to any of the groups, some happen here, you may have met her. She does birth to 6 in terms of programming for early childhood. The Early Childhood Partners, that's a grant that is overseen through the Student Services Department that funds all of her great work. We have home foster tutoring twice. And then educational programming for homeless and foster students also falls under the supervision of the Student Services Department. So our focus within Student Services is to educate the whole child and make sure we're meeting the needs of all of our students. I'm going to start with some of the services before I get into what our programming looks like. So related services is a good portion of the services that get provided through the special ed department. And there's a pretty lengthy list. So related services include counseling, nursing, OT, PT, speech and language services, augmentative and alternative communication. So students need communication devices that would fall under there, and the services to support that. Our BCBA services is a related service. Parent training falls under a related service, so there's home consultation, that's a part of that. ABA therapy is a related service, and any other home services would fall under those. Assistive technology, if we have a student that requires some orientation and mobility services. Vision services are a related service, deaf, hard of hearing, and transportation is a related service. So transportation for students outside of what's provided by the district is determined by their need, whether it's physical or other disability. So our special education programming starts in the district with our integrated preschool program. That program is at the winter school. It serves students, our children ages 3 to 5. It incorporates special education services and related therapies within an integrated model. It's not just special education students. We have peers that come into the program too. And we work on a ratio determined by the Department of Ed of 7 special education students or students with disabilities and 8 peers. So there's that model. They focus on cooperative play, promoting social skills and self-esteem, developing language skills and early literacy and math skills, and it's all through a multi-sensory thematic approach, and it combines small group and whole class activities. Currently, this year, we have added our 3rd preschool classroom, so our early childhood programs are growing. And we will continue to have and anticipate 3 preschool classrooms going into next year as well. We opened that 3rd classroom based on need in November. All of our schools provide services that are our academic learning centers, so our moderate special education teachers. Each of the elementary schools has 2 moderate teachers that support the academic learning centers, the K through 5 level, and then we have 3 at the middle school level for each grade level to support academic learning centers, and then we have 3 at the high school. They work on focusing on goals that are academically centered within the IEPs, plus any executive function, organization, school skill goals. You might see that in your child's IEP. They work in a push-in, pull-out service model, so there will be services that happen in the learning center that may be direct, specific teaching using certain programs, but we also support in class. And the support in class can be a combination of teaching assistant or special education teacher to meet those needs. We also have, at each of the levels, a therapeutic support. So at the elementary level, you would know it as the TLC or Therapeutic Learning Center. We have therapeutic support at the middle school as well. And then at the high school, we have a Therapeutic Learning Center as well that is supported by one of our special education teachers and one of our school counselors. So with the therapeutic support that students need, it would focus on social, emotional, behavioral, as well as academic support. And again, it's a combination of a push-in and pull-out model. So students who have this type of level of service at the elementary school will transition up to the middle school with support. It may look a little different based on the school structure, but the support is there. And then also it continues to be a need at the high school level. Our intensive learning program is located at the Winthrop School. So this is a preschool through 5th grade model. It's intensive programming for students with intellectual impairments, autism, or developmental delays that need a high level of structure and support. Related therapies are provided in the program, but also within therapy rooms if needed. There's ABA as part of the philosophy, and there's discrete trials. They also provide academic and behavioral supports, and it's all dependent on the level of supports, depending on the need of the student. There's explicit instruction in developing functional skills, and also explicit instruction in academic areas as the students are able to gain those skills. Inclusion is part of the model too. We do include students in the general education classrooms and the activities or life of the school. And again, it's as they're able to access, and our goal is to increase the levels of access in both the general education classroom and throughout various activities in the life of the school, including the recesses and lunches and the integrated arts or specials. Our Center for Academic and Social Learning, or CASL program, that is at the Winthrop School as well. It's typically for students grades 2 through 5 who have global delays that may impact learning or performance across all academic areas. We also support within that not just the literacy, the math, or the written language, but also executive function and organization skills and social skills. There's a combination of individual, small group instruction and whole group instruction that can happen. And again, it's a push-in and pull-out model. Students will integrate for science and social studies, but they may come out for all of their specific contents from the reading and the math with the written language, or it could be a combination. It depends on the skill level of the student and what their needs are based on their skill levels. And then we have our language-based program. So our language-based program, currently we have programming at Cutler, Miles River, and the high school. Our high school program was new in the 2018-2019 school year. So this program is for students with above average cognitive skills who require support in the foundational skills to reading and written language development. So students who are having difficulty with decoding, encoding, which is spelling, and understanding the phonological processes. The program has highly qualified teachers who are trained in specific programs to meet student needs. Those include Orton Gillingham, Wilson, LIPS, visualization and verbalization, some of them. So they target support with phonological skills, reading fluency, reading comprehension. The comprehension also includes reading, but also vocabulary. So they can learn vocabulary comprehension. Focus on written language and executive function and organization. It's structured for individual, small group, and then whole class support, and that's dependent on the need of the student. So we have the language-based learning centers where students go for their direct and explicit instruction, and then we have students who will integrate for science and social studies and math. Currently, within the language-based program, we are running a small group math for 3rd grade right now. And again, we look to provide support in the content areas. We are shifting this program a bit for next year and including another avenue, which is sub-separate content areas for students who need a higher level of support across all of the academic areas. So that will start in the next school year for small group science and social studies, and then also include the math. The program also is at the middle school and the high school. The structures look a little different as you go up in grades. At the middle and high school level, they receive separate ELA as needed. Typically by the time they hit high school, they don't need as much of the sub-separate classes. They gain skills to access within the gen ed setting. They still do at the middle and high school are provided with academic support and specific reading and written language instruction. And then also organizational supports are continued through as well. Let me know if I'm missing anything. And then at the middle and high school levels, we have the Intensive Learning Academic Skills Program. The program at the high school level was new in the 2018-19 school year, so last year. And at the middle school level, we had done some reorganization of programming to support students coming up. So students in this program can have intellectual or neurological impairment or autism. And their support areas include reading and literacy, written language, math, executive function, social skills, and content area support. For some, it's focusing on functional academics. As they continue to get older, we start to focus on pre-employment and vocational skills. We look at daily living skills and community access and support. The programming is through individual and small group instruction. And then we include supports for participation in academic classes, integrated arts, and activities in the life of the school as the students are able to access. So at the high school, they're participating in some of the integrated arts, or what are they calling them? I always say integrated arts electives at the high school, as well as other after-school activities as well. And with inclusion, the support can range from the teacher providing the direct inclusion support or a teaching assistant providing the direct inclusion support into activities. Our extended school year programming, so we provide summer programming. For this summer, our programs were run, we have a 5-week or 6-week program. So July 6th through August 6th will be our 5-week, and then July 6th through August 13th will be our 6-week programs. And then we have other adjustments to programming based on individual needs of students. Our extended year summer programming, or ESY programming, includes specific programs. So our language-based program runs through the summer. Our intensive learning programs run in the summer. And our CASEL runs in the summer. And then we also provide tutorials specific to the academic areas, particularly reading and math, and then we have some social supports as well. And then our determination for summer is based on substantial regression of learned skills and the level of programming needs for the students, and they coordinate with the team in terms of making decisions around the summer piece. That was just a taste of our programs. I will tell you that over the course of the last 3 years, we've been really looking at our staffing and our student needs in the district, and we've been working to create programming to meet all of our student needs, and also enhancing the programs we've had. And so we're continuing to do that and make changes on a yearly basis as needed. I know there's been a lot of question over the budget, and I wanted to share some of the requests that I had made originally in terms of the start of the budget process. When we did these recommendations, I will share that it was a leadership team decision on determining the needs of the district and the needs of our students. So there was lots of discussion on priorities. So our initial requests for staffing included a board-certified BCBA. We have been contracting with an outside provider for BCBA services. And It's really expensive with the contracting, and we're not getting, I think, as big of a bang for our buck because we're limited to the time that the BCBA is in district. So we're looking to decrease our costs in contracted services by having our own person, but also increase the level of support we're providing in terms of supporting students who require an ABA analysis and discrete trial learning template for their acquisition of skills, but also to support with behaviors that might impact learning. And we're also looking to increase our ability to provide staff consultation, modeling, and training, and help with behavior plan development and support more consistently. We also want to be able to add a level of assisting families and accessing outside agencies and resources as part of this. In the initial request, we did request a licensed social worker, and the reason for doing that was looking at how we can better support the emotional, behavioral needs of our students, and also, again, looking at how do we assist families in accessing outside agencies and resources. This hasn't moved on in the budget, the LICSW. So what we're now doing with Kristen Lazaro, who's our Director of Counseling, is circling back and looking how we can maximize the staffing we have in district to be able to provide a higher level of support for this model. We've asked for a language-based program teacher, and again, we're looking to enhance our elementary program by providing a higher level of support for students within the content areas. And we want to also ensure that we're continuing to provide a high-quality language-based program. We have great staff in our language-based program who are really trained and know their stuff, and we want to add to that. Did ask for 0.3 of speech and language pathologist, which sounds kind of silly, but we have a 0.7 right now. We want to increase those hours for that because we have an increasing need to support students. We also are looking at how we can decrease some of our contractual expenses by having additional staffing on board and have other areas of expertise. As I mentioned earlier, the English language education program falls under the Student Services Department. So currently we have a model of tutors who are ESL certified and licensed through the Department of Ed who provide the services. We're looking at how we can maximize our time with students. So again, we're looking at how we can better cross-grade and support students. This position did not follow through into our last reiteration of the budget, which is okay because I think we're going to circle back and relook at our ELE programming across the district and how we can better support students through the model we currently have. Some of the ongoing challenges that we have with special education or the Student Services Department that we're working on and really paying attention to is ensuring that we have consistent services and practices. And this just doesn't mean special education, it means the district as a whole, so we're talking gen ed as well. And really looking at our multi-tier systems of support across all settings to really focus on the academic and social and emotional needs of our students. So we want to continue to promote rigorous programming and positive outcomes for our students. We want to decrease the level of student need. We want to get students earlier so their level of need isn't higher as they're moving into the upper grades. And we really want to be able to maximize on our services so we can increase the abilities to meet the higher levels of student need in a less restrictive setting. Space and facilities to create and expand programming is always a challenge in the district. Overall special education costs continue to increase, and we still need the services. So contracted services each year continue to increase, even in the amount that we're charged. Out-of-district tuitions always increase. We estimated 2.72% in out-of-district tuition increases per out-of-district site. Transportation costs, those increase with the needs of our students in terms of whether it's our out-of-district placements or the needs of transportation in district. And then legal expenses are overall increase in costs as well. Just a few little pieces of information regarding the special ed population to put it in context. So looking over the last 5 years, we've had a 4.2% increase in our special education population. Currently, we have about 314 students being serviced in district through special education. When you add on out-of-district students and then students in private schools who access our services, we're at about 387 special education students receiving services through us. Just in this school year, we had 21 students come into the district who we were not aware of who were requiring special education services. And that's a combination of school choice and move-ins. So those are things we have to take into consideration as we begin the school year and start scheduling and staffing. When we look at our students who are receiving in-district services, about 65% of our students require moderate to high need levels of services. So that can equate to 6 hours plus in service time. And some of the challenges we have is lack of contingencies to address any unanticipated needs of students. And these were all pieces that were presented a couple of weeks ago when we presented in a workshop model to the school committee. I'm wondering, before we get to wonderings and questions, because Dr. Kuchenberger is here as well, and she was going to share some budget information. Do you want to do your piece first, and then we can kind of pull it all together and then answer any questions you have?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. Good afternoon, everyone. I apologize for being a few minutes late. I'm just going to back this up to give you a visual to focus on talking to you a little bit about the Student Opportunity Act. But then also want to talk to you about some of the district level commitments that we have that we're currently working on and things we plan to put in place for you as soon as next school year, some of them even starting as soon as this school year. So as you may know, my name is Julie Cooper. I'm the interim superintendent here in Hamilton-Wenham. My contract is through June 30th of this year. We've been really busy in the last few weeks focusing on developing a budget that is student-centered and needs-based. We implemented a completely new budget process for us here in the district with a few goals in mind. First thing first, putting student needs at the center of every decision that we make. Second thing is really increasing transparency and honest communication about what our needs really are. We have a lot of things to celebrate here in Hamilton-Wenham. As you all know, having children in the school system, you see evidence of that every single day. But we also have a lot of work to do. And we know that in order for us to do the work that our students are depending on us to do and the services that we are committed to providing, that means we need to have adequate resources. So hopefully today is a day for you to ask any questions that you might have so that you can all become ambassadors of our needs and our message and help join us in really getting folks out to vote and support the school budget this year. So as Stacy mentioned, we are really committed to being able to meet the needs of all of our students right here in our home district. We want to develop programs and enhance our physical spaces so that our students don't have to go anywhere else to receive a high quality education, and we can do that right here within the district. Of course, that takes vision, that takes courage, that takes will, and that takes resources. And I believe that we have all of those things already here in the districts. We just need to get them all in line so that we can execute on that. Something that's really exciting that's happening for the entire state of Massachusetts is the passage of the Student Opportunity Act. How many folks are familiar with the Student Opportunity Act? A couple people. So I'll give you just a brief overview. Back in November, the Student Opportunity Act was passed with the mission in mind of really addressing the equity and opportunity gap that persists across the Commonwealth. It happens in every single community across the state. Despite our best efforts, we continue to see that many of our subgroups are not performing as well as others, and we don't accept that, and we certainly want to do everything we can to address that. Part of the challenge in addressing those persistent opportunity and achievement gaps has been making sure that we have the resources available to each of the school districts in order to implement those evidence-based programs. So this takes a huge step forward for us as a state. It's a 7-year bill, if you will, and right now we are in the process of developing our own student opportunity plan for the Hamilton-Wenham Regional School District. What this means for us, if you were to look at our Chapter 70 funding, which is our largest source of revenue outside of our taxpayers' support, for Hamilton-Wenham, we're looking at about a $254,000 increase over what we received last year in Chapter 70 funding. There's about I'm not going to say the exact number, I'm not sure how much money actually was approved across the state, but about 80% of all the funds that are available in year 1 of the Student Opportunity Act are going to 35 districts in the state. And so when you think that we have a couple hundred districts across the state, you might be wondering, why is that? Well, here in the Commonwealth, as we should, we have a commitment to equity. And equity is really different than equality. And I always like to use the analogy that equality is everyone gets a pair of shoes, equity is everyone gets a pair of shoes that fits, right? So if you think about it in that way, it makes sense that our neediest communities across the state would get the largest portion of funding. With that being said, this act actually allows for opportunity for every single community, including us. And we're super excited about this, and we are really excited to start communicating with our community to get some input on what is the best way for us to maximize those additional dollars that we're receiving. So the Department of Education was charged with ensuring that every single school district not only accepts the funds, but then uses the funds very intentionally and very specifically. And so they have 4 commitments that they have asked every single school district and every single community surrounding those school districts to commit to. So the first one is making sure that we're intentionally focusing on student subgroups who are not achieving at the same high levels of their peers. And so subgroups can be socioeconomic status, it can be high special needs, it can be race, it can be ethnicity, it can be gender, all of those different subgroups that we look at every year when we're saying who are we serving well and who could we be serving better. So that's our first commitment. The second is to adopt, deepen, or continue evidence-based programs. And that's really specific in the evidence-based programs. It's not just monies to help lower the tax rate. As much as we all would like some tax relief, that's not what this money is intended for. It has to be specifically put towards closing those persistent gaps for our subgroups and making sure that we're using evidence-based programs to do so. So not necessarily buying more stuff or materials, but really looking at programming because we know that's what's going to create the sustainable change over time. And then also making sure that we're monitoring this success. So we're going to create a plan in the next few months. It has to be submitted by April 1. And then that plan has to have a monitoring component. So we're going to be asking ourselves, okay, here's our great idea. Here's the evidence-based program. Here's the gap we're trying to close. How are we going to know along the way that we're actually making progress before we get 7 years out? So what's it going to look like in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months at the end of the next school year? And we're thinking about that all the time, but this really has an amplified focus on that accountability piece in that way. And then fourth, the part that I think is often easily overpassed is engaging families and engaging the community in this commitment and in this work. And so one of the things I've been thinking a lot about is the awesome responsibility we have of having your children for 6.5, 7 hours a day. We're really lucky. Some days we probably see your children more than you do, depending on after-school activities and things like that. But we know that in order for us to maximize that investment that we're making during the day, we need to make sure that students and families also have support beyond the school day. And Stacy talked a little bit about some of those efforts that we're trying to move forward in this budget. And then so we have those 4 commitments. Sounds easy to commit to, right? I think we could all raise our hand and say, I'm on board with that. Then we also have some guidelines that we have to follow. And they really support those commitments. We have to, again, make sure, and I'm going to keep saying, those evidence-based program selections. that we're not just doing the nice to have, but we actually have the evidence to back it up so that we can promise to our local taxpayers and to our legislators that they're going to get a maximum return on their investment that they've made with the Student Opportunity Act. We're thoughtfully engaging the community, and I think one of the things that's really hard for us as educators is number 3, do a few things very well. So rather than trying to stretch those dollars out across multiple programs, let's really hone in and make a specific, measurable, targeted goal that we can support with these funds and then do it really well. And focus on the implementation. So really being intentional and strategic about what we're doing and why we're doing it. Those 2 questions I mentioned earlier, who are we serving well and who could we be serving better? Any one of the staff who works in the district knows I say that like a broken record because I really think it's that simple. We just have to take the time to reflect and ask ourselves those questions. So in terms of the plan, because we're receiving less than $1.5 million in additional funds, we are required to submit what's called a short form. Any district that has a increase in funding over $1.5 million is creating a long form. So that's just some of the logistics for you. In case you're hearing some of this stuff out there, you understand Hamilton-Wenham is a short form district. The majority of the districts in the state are, right? And when we think about evidence-based programs, that's kind of educational jargon we use all the time. We know what that means, but just to help you have a window into what that means. It can look like enhanced core instruction, and the Department of Ed has a couple of really, what they say, like high return on investment strategies that they endorse. One would be expanding access to full-day pre-K for all 4-year-olds. For some communities in the Commonwealth, they don't yet have full-day kindergarten that's free. So we're talking about that. And so just moving the needle with some of our kindergarten programming count. For us here in Hamilton-Wenham, when I think about that early intervention, I'm all about free pre-K for all kids. I think that all students should have access to a high-quality pre-K program that's affordable, better yet free. But one of the things that we're working on here in Hamilton-Wenham is just ensuring that our kindergarten has the DESE recommended support ratio. So this year, we added a 7th kindergarten because we only budgeted for 6, but we knew back in July that our enrollment numbers were starting to creep up to like 140, 143, 144, 145, and just a quick math problem, 145 kids divided across 6 classrooms gives you really large kindergarten classrooms. And we also know that that investment in early intervention, in preschool particularly, you get like a $8.97 or 94 cents return on every dollar spent when you focus on preschool programming and early education. So this is a smart place for us to focus. I'm not sure that this will be the core of our focus just yet because there's still a lot of items in motion as we develop our plan. But one of the things that even though we added a 7th kindergarten class this year, we still have kindergarten classes of 20, 22 across the district. The Department of Education recommends an 18-to-2 ratio, and so 18 students for 1 classroom teacher and 1 teaching assistant or paraprofessional. We have a 22-to-1 ratio. We have 1 kindergarten teacher in every classroom. We don't yet have teaching assistants in every kindergarten classroom, and we're really behind, if you will, in terms of making that investment in our earliest learners. And so one of the things we were trying to move forward in the FY21 budget is, can we get creative, knowing that we don't have the additional funds to fully support full TAs, can we get creative either in using these additional funds that we just are learning about and or making some partnerships with some of our local colleges and universities to bring in their fellowship programs. So, but that's one way that we could enhance core instruction at the earliest level in order to help us solve some bigger problems that we see persisting across our grades. We also could be looking at research-based early literacy programs in pre-kindergarten and early elementary. The good news is we're already really hyper-focused on this in the district. We recently formed an elementary data literacy team that is studying our data and asking those 2 questions: who are we serving well, who could we be serving better? And so we could use some of this funding to leverage that work and ensure that it then results in implementation of some evidence-based program. Right now we're at like the study stage of that. We're really just looking and trying to identify targeted student supports. And so I'm not going to read all 17 of the lists that Desi has provided as in terms of priorities or examples, but targeted student supports talk about inclusion and co-teaching, some of the things that you heard Stacy talk about earlier, and that commitment that we have to ensuring that all students are able to receive the very best education right here in their home schools. We could also be looking at talent development, so diversifying our educator and administrator workforce through recruitment and retention. We could be looking at developing a leadership pipeline for programs within our schools, and that fellowship partnership that I talked about with colleges and universities can play a key role in that. And then the fourth broad area is really looking at conditions for student success. So this includes facilities improvements, things that are already priorities and needs that we've identified in our district. This gives us some support to actually move the needle in some of those areas, making sure that we have safe and healthy schools, making sure that we have parent-teacher home visiting programs is one of the evidence-based programs that we can choose to implement. Community partnerships for school enrichment and wraparound services. So this is a conversation we've already been having with our local rec department right here in Hamilton Wenham. So one of the things I find really affirming about this is, yes, it's another thing to do in a very short period of time, but I'm confident that we can do it. And certainly there's a big motivator in those additional funds that our district will receive. But more importantly, when I look at this list of 17 items, evidence-based programs that the Department of Ed has provided, we're doing a lot of these things in some sort of way. So I think our focus is really going to be on that deepened part as opposed to, kind of coming up with brand new programming. So I wanted to share that with you because it's a lot of information. You might be hearing different things coming out, different numbers coming out. For us, it means an additional $254,000 over what we received last year in terms of Chapter 70. That's about $190,000 more than what we were anticipating, which, right now every penny really counts in terms of the way we're trying to both develop that student-centered budget, but also understand what's the capacity of the community in order to support that. So I'm happy to answer any questions about the Student Opportunity Act in general or the budget process. The one thing I would say is that although Stacy was sharing with you sort of what's in and what's not in the budget, it's still in work. We have a capital subcommittee meeting on Tuesday evening where the capital committee will really come to what's going to be the final budget that will be recommended to the full committee on Wednesday the 12th. And Wednesday the 12th is a really awesome opportunity for you to get immersed and get engaged in the budget process if you're not yet. We have a public hearing at 6:30, and we hope that we have a lot of parents there and a lot of community members there. We want you to stand up during the public comment piece and speak to us, tell us what your priorities are, tell us how you think this budget is meeting those needs or not. That's the one piece that I think has been missing so far is really community and parent voice in the process. And then we have, so next week, I should have said this in order. Next week we really have 3 big public opportunities. One, we have Monday night at the high school library, that parent workshop that if you're a parent, you got an email about. That's about our strategic blueprint, so you could come be a part of that if you're available. Tuesday is the capital subcommittee meeting where they're going to kind of roll up their sleeves and finalize the budget recommendation. And then Wednesday is the public hearing on the budget. And I don't mean to be saying budget, but tis the season. And all of the work that we do is really, the budget does drive a lot of what we do. And we're trying to flip that a little bit and let our needs drive the budget. So that'll take us a couple of years to get off the right track with that. But I could talk about this stuff for days. I'll let you ask any questions that you have. I'm happy to answer anything, and I'm sure Stacy and her staff will as well.
I have a question about the changes in the Student Opportunity Act relative to Chapter 70. Up until now, I think that Chapter 70 has been sort of general aid that would not be applicable to certain categories of spending. Is it now the case that any further Chapter 70, over and above what we've been getting in the past, would be only applicable to those categories that you have to report on?
I'll be honest with you and say I don't know specifically.
Because that would have the effect of freezing Chapter 70 for anything but those particular categories?
Well, I think we're always held accountable, right? And we have accountability measures year over year and expectations that we're supposed to be meeting. My understanding is that the changes made through the Student Opportunity Act are really trying to modernize the Chapter 70 formula, and it's based on the recommendations from, remember in 2015, they did that big Chapter 70 study. It's based on that. And so it's not that you'll only receive increases related to those categories, it's that they're looking at the categories and saying, what is it actually going to take your district to be able to close some of these gaps or meet some of these needs, is the way
So could the 190 net over the current amount in the budget that you kind of covered,
Yeah.
could that be simply added to the current Chapter 70 number in the budget and applied to whatever's in it already, as opposed to putting a new, something else in?
So, yes, and I'll say, yes, it will be added to our budget. We've already updated our revenue, our Chapter 70 revenue to show that. The work that we have to do is show how it's helping close the achievement gap. And so we don't necessarily have to add anything in to our current budget proposal because, like I said, when I look at those 17 evidence-based programs, the language-based teacher that we're adding so that we can provide more individualized instruction, that is, we'll be connecting the dots to that.
But that's still discretionary. You don't have to put that in.
Well, no. I would say have to is a loose term, right?
Well,
we don't have to do anything.
It's a choice.
Well, what we have to do is make sure that we're meeting the needs of every single student. And so if we don't create it in district, we have to locate it outside of district.
That's not really my question, just asking about. And also, how many out-of-district placements are there currently?
Currently, we have.
I will say that currently we are funding, right, as of today, 50 out-of-district placements that are funded through our budget. It's been a shift. We've been upwards of 50.
I'm sorry,
about 55 0.
Okay.
It's been upwards of 57 this year, but based on graduations, aging out, we've had students move. Right now, it's at 50 that we're funding.
And do you anticipate that growing in the next year? Or is there no way to know?
Well, there's ways. So
Because
we look at it like this.
The number that was quoted in a recent joint meeting with the towns was 70.
Yep. So what that's based on is our knowns.
Right.
And at the time we developed our initial budget proposal, I think we had 54 kids out of district. So that's our known, right? Plus tuition increases. And then we have our known unknown. So these are students who are currently working with families and working on developing programs. They could have potential for an out-of-district placement, or maybe we know that parents have unilaterally placed their child out of district. So I call that the known unknown, and we have 16 of those. So I think that's where that 70 number was coming from, is adding our known to our known unknowns. But then, as Stacy mentioned earlier, we have these unknown unknowns. We have families who aren't yet here, or who may move in mid-year and already have placements that we don't yet know about. The current budget doesn't count for that.
Okay, so the current budget accounts for the 50?
It counts for the known and the known unknown.
And what does that add up to?
So it's about, over FY20, it's a little over $800,000 in new out-of-district tuition.
Right, that's the number of students.
Let's say it's 67.
Okay.
The current budget proposal.
Okay, my last question goes to the, once again, back to the Student Opportunity Act. I think in that act, I might be wrong, there's money that's finally going to be available from the state for special ed transportation, which I don't think we've ever gotten, ever, in the history of, and it's kind of amazing that we even getting that. Is there any, do you have any clue yet how much we might get?
So we don't know yet because it'll be based off of, my understanding is it'll be based off our FY20 actual costs. And in year one, right now, it's looking like 25% of our FY20 actual out-of-district costs.
Okay.
So, if that,
So it'd be a little under 200,000, I suppose, or something like
I don't think it would be quite that much.
We actually had a presentation earlier today. Myself and Vinny Mioni, who's our assistant superintendent for finance and administration. to Jay Sullivan, who's at the Department of Ed, did a presentation earlier today. They haven't finished their final guidelines, but what it looks like is our circuit breaker claims are based on a foundational amount. So anybody over the foundation in costs, we get to claim circuit breaker. And typically, technically it's supposed to be at 100%, but it's at 50%, and they've had different percentages. Each year, we've never quite hit 75% of return. What Mr. Sullivan has said today.
That does not include transportation.
No, so what's going to happen is you have your foundation, and then you have your tuition costs over foundation you can claim a portion of, and then for, like Dr. Kuchenberger had said, for year one, it's 25% of the transportation cost on an individual student. So, so it will be based on the individual students. And what's good that we heard today is that transportation, if you have tuitions that are under the foundation, that transportation can tip you over foundation and you can claim a percentage. But it's incremental. It'll be 25, 50, 75, and then you'll get to 100%.
Thank you.
Great question. Anyone else have questions?
I have a question, and forgive me if it was already covered in a budget presentation I didn't attend, specific to special education budget. Were there, I know what you have asked for in this, and it's all a little in the gray area, were there any cuts that were made initially to the special education? Positions, half positions, whatever.
So I wouldn't call them cuts, but we've done some, created some reductions and reallocations.
Okay.
So again, one of the benefits and the reasons why we want to do a student's needs-based budget is that we're looking at how have the needs changed from year over year, because they're not always exactly the same. And then we look at staff reallocation or allocation. That's the first thing we do, like back in November, at our very first budget meeting, we were looking at enrollment projections, need projections, programming, and looking at that first. So we've reduced in this budget proposal, you'll see a reduction in our contracted services line. And that's because we did a cost benefit analysis and we were looking at what are we paying to contract out for BCBA services, for speech and language services, and for ESL services. And if we were to invest in our own people, we almost double, in some cases even more than double, the service to our students and the support to our staff and families for the same or less money. And so with the BCBA, it'll actually be less money, and we'll have our own person who's a part of our culture and shares our values, and we will more than double the hours than what we're currently paying for less money. Same is true with the speech and language position that you see. So that's one example of places where we've reallocated and been able to reduce. Other things, Stacy's going to be leading a teaching assistant deployment analysis group. I don't know, they'll come up with a better title than that, but that's what it means in my mind. But we're going to look at really shifting mindsets too about, rather than thinking about a teaching assistant as an assistant to a teacher, they're really there to support students. So even rebranding that and calling it like the student support team, and thinking about how do we create a staff that has high level of skills and flexibility so that as student needs shift throughout the year, so do the student support services. So that's another way that I believe will be increasing services and efficacy while also reducing costs. It's just, we're in the very beginnings of starting that work for next year. Does that answer your question?
Yep.
We haven't eliminated any classroom teaching positions. We have added a language-based teaching position because the need is there, and we know that for some of our students, the current model is serving them very well. In fact, I'll brag and say the evidence, the data that we're looking at shows that we're serving our in-district students in our language-based programs than some students who are in private placements. And next year, we're going to add another layer that's a different type of support, a more intensified support for students who need that. Again, with the goal in mind that all of our kids are all of our kids and they belong right here in their home districts and their home schools.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And just so you know, we the leadership team and as individuals in buildings and within every department, we really scrutinized the budget this year line by line and really looked at like our shifting where our needs are better met, and we're again focused on servicing all students across the district, how we can better allocate funds to better meet needs. So it's a lot of work, but it was a lot of time, effort, energy, and I think positive outcomes.
We're also looking for high leverage investments, so where are the investments we can make that are going to be the biggest bang for our buck, if you will, in terms of knowing that we can't add everything that we would want to, but how do we prioritize in that way? And then also looking at creative funding sources, so how can we do some of these things with alternative funding sources, whether it be using the grant in a higher leverage way, or seeking like our local ed funds, our local ed fund or our friends groups to help with certain things so that it frees up some resources within the budget capacity.
So Becky and I have heard from a number of parents just wanting to understand more how their child's program transitions from elementary school to middle school or middle school to high school, which is very helpful to see just an overview of programs in general. But I think it might be helpful recognizing that every child is different and every IEP is different. But maybe take just like the spirit of putting the student at the center, like take a persona of a student in middle school that maybe has a language-based, maybe they're in the LDME classroom or they just have a language-based IEP in some capacity, and what that might look like for that student to go from elementary school into middle school or middle to high, and maybe a student that is more in the social emotional category of IEP, and what that would look like, and just kind of give us a persona walkthrough of what that would feel like for some of the students.
So we've done a lot of work on vertical alignment with special ed staff across the whole district. So we meet regularly and we talk about our programs and our transitions of students. We've worked to build programs, so there is a vertical, when I say vertical alignment, when you're going from elementary to middle, we can meet the needs of the students that have specific needs at the elementary level, whether it's programming or just even grid services for moderate teachers. And we look to make sure we can meet it at the middle school level and then the high school level. It looks different at each level depending on the program. But a student who's in our language-based program would go into, if needed, and the team determines they still need a certain level of services, they would shift from the language-based program into the middle school language-based program. And again, it's depending on the needs of the student, but specific, explicit, and direct reading instruction and written language instruction will follow them as they need it. Content area support will follow them as they need it through each level. This goes the same for anybody who's therapeutic or behavioral supports. It may look a little different based on the structures, but they still will receive those supports they need. What happens each year in the spring is the teams, your child's team meets in transition discussions, so your 5th to 6th graders and then your 8th to 9th graders. Team meetings are established to specifically talk about what are the current needs of your child, and then how are they going to be met at the next level, and then what needs to be provided for services. And in some cases, what does not need to be provided for services anymore because they become more independent.
So can I share a couple of examples?
Yeah.
So I have like 4 or 5 concrete examples. One, the first thing we're doing is looking even at our 1st and 2nd graders and their programming needs, and looking at our elementary, middle, high school across the board and saying, do we already have a program in place when your child's in 1st grade at our middle and high school, so that you as the parent or as the guardian know that there's a plan, there's a trajectory, and there's a place for my child all the way up through. Because the first thing we want to do is avoid that stress and anxiety. My daughter just transitioned to a new school for kindergarten this year, and I didn't think it was going to be as big of a deal as it was. My husband was a little bit more on the ball with how big of a transition it was going to be. But now what that did for me was really teach me how early those feelings start and how early those worries can start for the grown-ups and for the kids. And so what we're trying to do is say, how can we connect kids? So if we have a student in the middle school, and I'm thinking of a very specific student right now, who's in the middle school, and we know that we want to be able to meet their program needs at the high school, how can we start that transition earlier? Who's the adult that maybe that will best align with something that they're passionate about, who might be able to connect with that student while they're in middle school, so that as they're getting ready, it becomes time for 7th grade, 8th grade, they know that, you know, Mr. or Mrs. So-and-so is waiting for me at the high school, and I already know I'm gonna have, you know, a connection and a peer group when I get there. And so that's already starting for some students that are in 6th and 7th grade, trying to build that bridge to middle school. Because as a parent, you know, if our kid comes home happy, healthy, and excited about what's coming next, then that helps us, I think, manage some of our worries about that big transition. And we're doing the same thing with students who are transitioning from elementary school up to middle school. So already, here it is January, February, we're already starting to say to the middle school principal, here's these students in elementary who are coming your way. Let's get down there, let's start sitting in on team meetings, let's start meeting families and making connections with families, and then let's start, you know, as the middle school staff, learning about those elementary students' passions, what their supports are going to look like, so that we can instill confidence through that really tricky transition, because we know it's hard from middle school, from elementary to middle, and that even though they're in the same building, it's still a big transition from middle to high school. So those are some things that are concretely happening right now. One of the other things that I'm really excited about at the high school, we've been doing, for lack of a better term, a space audit, and looking at how are we currently using all of our spaces in the high school, what programs are in the right spaces, and what programs need better spaces. So Stacy was talking about our, I'm going to get the acronym wrong,
Intensive Learning Academic Support Program,
the ILSP.
Yeah.
And so for that program, we want to be able to implement more adaptive daily living. And not just for that program, we're really thinking about it as full inclusion. How do all of our kids need some of those adaptive daily living skills? And so we used to call it OMAC, you know, for the general population. Now some schools are calling it adulting, but it's adaptive daily living, right? We all need to know how to do these things. And so how can we design a space? We actually used to have a space that was designed for this many years ago, but we're bringing it back in a way that's going to be really intentional, really purposeful, and that way, so when a parent has a child coming up, they know that at the high school there's going to be this pinnacle program, and there's all of these opportunities waiting for your child, so that you don't have to be worried about it year over year. You know that we're already programming for your elementary student at the middle and high school level. And that's been really exciting to have those conversations, and it also helps us plan better, so we make sure that we have the resources we need. We're doing the same thing at Winthrop in our intensive learning program, looking at the space that we have and saying, how can we make this space more intentional? How can when a parent walks into this room, they can see exactly what this room was designed to do, and it should look very intentional, and everything we put in place should be there for a reason. And so,
and similar to the looking at the high school and creating kind of that adaptive living space to develop skills, again, along with the space that's currently at Winthrop, also looking at how do we incorporate that, so there's opportunities for building more daily living skills, adaptive skills for students.
so it's exciting.
Not to try to back to like just the practical, but I have 5th grade going to 6th grade. Our typical meeting is in the spring, so we have like a separate meeting with middle school before we get. I mean, I guess the question is what the next 4 months is like for someone like who's transitioning. I guess is it really like a meeting with IEP, a meeting with transition team? How does that look for us?
If you have a meeting in the spring, they try to combine, because the last thing we want to do is create multiple meetings for parents. And we are actively looking at like representation. So there's staff at those meetings from the receiving school to kind of answer any questions and help with the determination of services. And Lindsay McGovern, our secondary, which some of you have met, she's part of those meetings and helps facilitate those as well.
I was introduced to the
we also collaborate a lot. So Maureen and Lindsay, and when Sarah was here previously, there was collaboration and conversation too between coordinators and ensuring that as the facilitators for meetings, we all have important information. So we make sure that we're addressing any questions, concerns, or needs at the meeting level as well.
Just in terms of the middle school, I I've only been to elementary, so I don't really have one, so I don't have a lot of experience on it. In terms of electives, is there a general kind of I know some schools, some districts, don't do more electives during your study time. Is there like an overall situation that we're dealing with here, or if you're in call-out, it's sort of?
I think it's really individualized, right? And so every student's plan is going to look different based on what they need. And I would say the same to be true for your transition. So your transition might not look like my student transitioning to middle school. And I would also encourage you to reach out to Lindsay now and say, you could get into the school tomorrow if you haven't even yet been in the physical space. Or, ask questions really specific to your child so that you can have that customized experience, because what works for some students isn't going to work for all. We do some general transition planning from phase to phase, but then we know some of our students will need something more personal and more individualized.
There are schedules built at the middle school level, and student schedules can look differently depending on their level. But there is an overarching schedule and active support.
I think an important position, having now an 8th grader who transitioned, is the liaison that you're assigned. There's a grade age liaison, so a 6th grade you will be assigned a liaison who would be if you have an academic support teacher, but they're your go-to contact there at the middle school, whether it's daily, whether social, emotional. My daughter physically couldn't get to school today, here's why, and they're going to work with the team within the building for you and advocate on your behalf and your students.
Thank you for bringing that up, because that also,
So to me, as a trend,
yes, yeah.
Huge. Yes, because elementary is so tiny, you already know everybody, and you can handle it all in your own. But middle school is kind of what?
So definitely, your liaison is your first go-to.
Yeah. So
thank
it
you.
was seamless by the end.
And that's a teacher, not Lindsay.
Yeah.
An actual
The liaisons are teachers,
Yes, they're
so
teachers.
they are, they could be directly working with your child and are the service provider. At the high school, the liaison is not necessarily always the direct service provider, but they're the case manager.
And I would just add to that, like my son's a sophomore now, but by the time he was in 8th grade, he was meeting with his liaison and telling her when his academic support was going to be to suit what he wanted, and it was worked out. So it's not unflexible. It can be worked out with, give and take on both sides. So.
And that's what we want to start seeing when students start hitting the secondary level, is them really advocating for their needs and being part of the decision-making process. And for those of you who have students who will be turning 14, once your child hits 14 or within the year that they're turning 14, they're invited to the table. And they are part of determining their needs, sharing what their concerns are, sharing what their vision is, and helping us drive the decisions that the team makes.
I think you mentioned earlier that there's some school choice students receiving some of these special ed services, is that correct?
Yes.
So I'm just kind of curious, does the student's home district reimburse the full amount of the cost of some of these, whether it be out-of-district stuff or in-district, so it's all on Hamilton and Wenham to absorb that?
Yeah, so there is a range of tuition reimbursement, if you will, when it comes to school choice. It's not called that, but for just a traditional choice in, choice out, kids come to us, our kids go to other schools as well. It's $5,000. And then depending on the programming, it can be, 9, 8, 10, 12, 35,000. It's determined based on each individual student's.
Yeah, I remember even one of your presentations, you talked some of these out-of-district costs are 50, 100,000 potential type of dollars.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of curious about this balance, because I don't know how many, and if it's available, how many school choice children are in our 70 number that you mentioned before, for example.
Oh, for out of district?
Yeah, for example, is that?
We don't, so
We don't
have any, but I'll expand on what Dr. Kuchenberger said. So there's a base amount that all get reimbursed for all students, and then we do submit claims for students who are special education students who are school choice, and we don't, it's not an equated service, it's never dollar for dollar, but we do get some relief back in that, and then when we don't have any, but out-of-district tuitions do get billed back to the district of origin. We pay up front, and then it's a bill back process, but we haven't had to go through that process.
So they're all in districts, is what you just said, is that correct?
Some go to like the tech schools and things like that, so there's a different rate for that.
But you're saying, are all of the out-of-district students residents of Hamilton?
Well, the real question was, are school choice students coming in, taking advantage of a lot of services that Hamilton Wenham are paying for, and the home district is not reimbursing?
It's a small amount of reimbursement, but we do provide, as Dr. Berger said, a range of services for students who come into the district through school choice. Once they're here, it's just like they're our students. We, and again, our focus is on meeting the needs of all of our students.
How many choice in are, how about you, Keith? How many choice students are there this year? And out of that number, how many are
I don't
special
know the
ed?
specific breakdown. We have 100 choice students this
100?
year that have choiced in.
Okay.
Next year, that number is going to change because we have a large senior class with 19 seniors who are choice students who will be graduating. And our middle school enrollment has been up over the last 3 years. So currently, we have 7 seventh graders who are choice students and 6 sixth graders who are choice students. So let me go in sequential order. We currently have 6 sixth graders choicing in, 7 seventh graders choicing in, 19 eighth graders choicing in, and then it's 19 freshmen, 19 sophomores, 16 11th graders, and 12 seniors this year. That's our current school year choice numbers. So as you imagine, they're all going to go up a grade. And so our choice number is going to drop next year by about 16 kids because we only have a couple, although our numbers are low in 7th and 8th grade, our general Hamilton Wenham resident population is up. So we only have a couple slots available for siblings. So we'll see much less next year. Does that make sense?
Can you provide that number of how many choice kids are special ed students? Can you find that?
I don't have the total off the top of my head. I can tell you what for the students who came in district, we made one of the slides, the 21. Of the portion, it was 10 or 11 students who were school choice that came in with established IEPs in place. That was through this year.
And there were some already here.
Yeah. Yes.
Any other questions that you might have?
I don't have a question, but I had a student who went through the language-based program, has graduated from college. We had 3 different special ed directors over her time period through, so there was a lot of changing programming. Something that I sort of advocated for in the process in terms of transitioning was having her help the younger students, not just the professionals in the building, but as a student, speaking to another student and mentoring and telling them it's going to be okay when you get to the high school. And, I know you can't read right now in the 2nd grade, but and for parents to see those high schoolers that are being successful, that go on to college, and I just think it's a program that we're missing in our special ed department. She did some mentoring through the tech department, which worked out perfect. I went down to the middle school and helped with sort of some tech accommodation stuff with a student.
When did your daughter graduate?
In the high school?
Yeah.
15.
2015?
Yeah.
So we do, I'm wondering, I don't know exactly when the peer mentoring program was put in place at the high school. I don't know if Lindsay, you know. But currently, every high school student has a peer mentor. And that's one of the things we're working on with the transition is hooking our middle schoolers up with that peer mentor earlier on. So I don't
Yeah, no, I understand the high school, but I think the high schoolers could really be beneficial at the elementary.
To bring mentoring down to the elementary.
Yeah,
that's great.
parents can see it, because I had an older daughter too, and I was like, there's no way she's gonna function in the high school, having seen what my older daughter was doing. So I think it's helpful to parents to see, because it's always a struggle to see that, there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and some of these kids are, most of them are coming out very successful and moving on to, great things, so.
No, that's great to hear, and I'd love to talk with you more about it, because I'd love to have your daughter back, and maybe we can talk more about that. We're also working on, and we've been trying to gather, information from parents and students in terms of how they're feeling in our programs and what our programs have done to them. So we can get a sense of, are we meeting everybody's needs? And we've had some positive parent feedback in terms of our programs and some of the comments they've made as we're looking at things and looking at how we can better communicate to the community what our programs are and the great staff we have in all of our programs and again, that our strengths in supporting students over some of the
When should we send feedback?
You can send it to me. You can email it directly to me, s.busick@hwschools.net. A lot of you see the coordinators on a more consistent basis than you see me. You can also provide feedback to them.
I'd also be happy to have a one-to-one meeting with anyone who wants to sit down and just have a cup of coffee and talk about your experience in the district, if that feels more comfortable than sending.
I have two questions. One is about early screening, which I think it was 2018 when it was voted in, meaning in the elementary age. My daughter was late to be identified and late to receive services. So as far as if that has shifted, since now that she's in 8th grade, clearly, if that has changed at all within our district, because I don't need to speak to the choir that you already said it, the value in early identification for language-based learning disabilities.
We still follow Child Find. There's a process at the building levels in terms of concerns regarding student, academic, or social and emotional development. And teams start at the building level discussing the child. I'm not sure how long ago your child was in the elementaries and the whole process, but she's in 8th now. So the buildings have been, and the elementary schools have been working on the intervention model, but also with that, like doing benchmarking data on students so they can really look at student need and then make determinations on instructional practices with students. So that is a process that's in place. And as they're monitoring benchmarking and student successes or challenges, then they're making determinations if they need to refer for special education. So those pieces are in process. And with our literacy committee too that's developed, we're also continuously looking at kind of the information and the data, and do we need to make any shifts? So I don't know, is that answering your question?
A little bit. I guess the question is, I guess it would be within the last 2 years, since I think it was October 2018 when...
The dyslexia screening?
Correct.
Okay.
If there is a screening that is in place, I think they have to present with one risk factor or something is how it reads. Is there something in place in our district currently that...
They haven't dug into it specific to the guidelines that should be coming down from DESE in terms of dyslexia screenings, but we have screenings in place that will meet the criteria for some of the identification. I just don't think that we've gotten to the place of having it communicated as a dyslexia screening. Does that make sense? I mean,
is that on the horizon? Or, I mean, just from a...
We're using FMP and they're using PALS, which provides indicators to lacking phonemic awareness skills to Haggerty that they've started at the elementary level, and then PALS for phonological skills. So they're looking at those pieces and then making determinations on instruction. They're not diagnosing dyslexia, saying this child is dyslexic, but
referring for evaluation. evaluation, or, I mean, teachers, let's be honest, are not gonna tell
Yeah, if
the
interventions
parents to
aren't
go get
working, yeah.
request testing.
Yeah. No, if interventions aren't working because they're tracking and they're doing the benchmarking data and the progress monitoring, if they're not seeing improvement with the interventions they're providing at the level 1s and the level 2s, then they're being recommended through the building level, through the IST process, for special education
That was not the case 4 years ago, so.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's two things going on right now that I believe will lead to that becoming more standardized practice. Number one, and some evidence that we already see, but number one, the early literacy data team, that is exactly what we're trying to get at, is how do we intervene earlier? How do we know, after the first benchmark, who are kids who are on grade level, who are the kids are below, what are we going to do about it, and then what do we do if what we're doing doesn't work, right? And so if we know that at the end of last year, 30% of our kindergartners weren't being on grade level, what's our protocol for those students who weren't meeting grade level benchmark? And maybe this is one of the tools that we look at, but part of it is working on the program descriptions, which the Special Ed Student Services Department has been working on, and then making this more transparent and available to the community. So you're going to see a whole new marketing push from our Student Services Department, where our website's going to become enhanced, and we're going to have some one-pagers about the different services that are available so that parents can inquire too. So it's coming from within based on what we're seeing in terms of progress and those benchmarks that Stacey talked about. But that you as a parent, I know this from my own experience, and you know this from your own experience, like you see things in a different way and you can bring that concern because you'll know that this is something that exists. Right now, how do parents know that it's even something that exists is one of my questions that I'm asking. So there's that. And then we also recently received a grant through the Essex County Learning Consortium, and we're looking at our multi-tiered support system. I'm not trying to throw all the educational jargon out in one sentence, but what that really means is we're looking at, who are we serving well right here on the bottom of the pyramid, that tier 1 instruction for all students, and then what do we do if, after trying all of that and working through our IST, which is our instructional support teams at each school, where we'll say, like, Julie's presenting some struggles, or maybe there's that one indicator that's making us say, like, is there something more going on here? Does she need more time? Is it lack of exposure, or is there something more specific? And then we'll be able to literally, click on that and say, okay, so what are the tools we have in place to determine more specifically what might be happening? So that work is ongoing, and we have, I'm excited to have the middle school involved with that work along with the elementary, so we're not just putting it all on what are we doing in elementary, but we're saying how does it progress up through the grades. And our director of curriculum and instruction, along with Stacey and some folks from her department, are working side by side on both of those things, the early literacy team and then the multi-tiered support stuff too. So those are two things that I think are going to lead to us identifying student needs earlier, and hopefully then being able to fill those gaps or provide those skills and those tools so students can exit out of special ed once they're learning all of the strategies that they need, if that becomes what's right and best for them. One indicator I would say that has probably been happening, and I don't have this empirically, but if you just look at the enrollment in our language-based programs, we went from having a handful of students the first year that we implemented the language-based program to this year, I think we have 17 students in our elementary language-based program in and of itself, which tells me that we're picking up on things earlier and serving students better, and then we're adding a 4th teacher in FY21 the next school year. So we'll certainly circle back though.
So that's one FTE is going to be at the elementary level.
Yes.
How many grades does that serve?
Currently, it's serving grades 3, 4, and 5. Last year, we did have a 2nd grade cohort, so we have placed 2nd grade students.
Because we didn't used to have it that little, and we would outplace it to top school, so.
I'm sorry.
We didn't used to have it until 4th grade, so we would outplace them when they were younger to top school.
Yeah, so we've expanded to meet student needs down to the 2nd grade level.
Does that answer your question?
Yes. Am I the only one who's going to ask another question?
They're good questions. They really are.
The last question is specific to curriculum, and it's specific to special ed but also regular ed as far as a writing curriculum goes in our district, which we do not have a regular ed writing curriculum in our district, then we do not have a special ed like an Empower in our district.
The elementary has picked up a writing curriculum. It's the Lucy Hawkins that they've been working on implementation of across all grade levels. Yeah.
This is the first year that it's across all grade levels. There were some grade levels that were piloting the Lucy Hawkins units of study, and that's out of Teachers College, the Reading and Writing Project. And so this year is the first year that, like, actually right now I can walk into any fifth grade classroom. They're all working on literary essay. And not only that, it was not to give away my superintendent's report for next week, but I then was in a second grade classroom yesterday, 2 second grade classrooms yesterday, and they were also working on literary essay, writing about their reading. And so I was telling them, like, do you know that fifth graders are doing the same thing you're doing, but they're doing it in a more scaffolded, age-appropriate way. So already it's very easy to see evidence of that the curriculum in place across the grades and how it's going to progress and meet students' needs where they are. Really, and that, what I love about the Lucy Hawkins units of study, and they selected it before I came, but I would have 150% advocated for it, is that it really is based on a learning progression. And so literally, teachers should be asking themselves, what can Julie do? What is she ready to learn? What is Julie doing well? What is she ready to learn? And it doesn't really matter what grade you're in, it matters what skills you have and what you're ready for next, which is awesome. I first studied the units of study back in 2011, and when I was a principal at the time, and I was like, where has this been all my life? Of course, it existed before then, but it was when it became new to me. So it really, I think you'll start to see.
Is that a K through 12 curriculum possibility, or is that just elementary?
So the actual units of study go up through 8th grade, but the skills that the idea is that they develop the skills in the early grades, and then in high school it's more application, but it's all based on the same body of literature. So if you were familiar with, like, say, Nancy Atwell's writing curriculum, which has been around for decades, it's all grounded in the same literature. It's just the way that Teachers College has packaged the units makes it really accessible for all teachers.
And as far as a curriculum for kids with language-based learning disabilities, specifically in written expression, there's nothing that the district uses, really.
At the elementary level, they're using the landmark method and framing your thoughts, which is part of full circle. But they are utilizing curriculum methods at the elementary level and carrying it through. That most of the instruction is targeted through their goal areas, and so they're pulling in the tools to help support the goal areas as needed.
At elementary.
At elementary.
And that's where that is.
And then at middle school, it's becoming more structured towards the content area in ELA. So they're following the grade level content areas for ELA, but doing scaffolding and modifications.
So that's in the regular ed, which the ELA teach, I mean, they're fantastic at the middle school, they really are. Regular ed, but
right. What about
specific
what
to
is happening in the language-based program in middle school and high school? Because I know I see evidence of other tools.
Right, and they're working. So they're working on building and looking at across all of our secondary special education programs and even the academic supports is what do we need to pull in for curriculum tools to help students better access and develop skills. Yeah. And then, Lindsay, do you want to add the work that?
I would say in general that in the language-based program in middle school, it's also based on the landmark method with some alteration to align it more with the regular ed curriculum. But I think it's
kind of similar
elementary.
throughout the trajectory.
And then in high school, it's also really focused on the landmark method of teaching executive functioning skills and scaffolding the executive functioning. There are also the district-wide initiatives that come from some best practices that we pull from the landmark method. Things like taking 2-column or Cornell notes, the reverbalization, yeah.
And we did a full secondary training last year of inclusive practices, and landmark outreach came in and worked with secondary staff all year on the strategies that included two-column note-taking and word walls, which is, it's good teaching practices for all, but it's more important for our language-based students who are taking secondary courses in content areas.
And now some of those folks are our employees, so.
And we have still some staff. Yes. Recruited, yeah. That's another word.
Okay. Great question.
You just mentioned some of the training you've done with staff, but going forward with like the next year, as you think about the next year, especially as it relates to special education, identification of needs or actually application of services in district, what are some of the professional development areas that you're going to focus on with staff?
We're looking at enhancing more of the PD towards specialized programs. So we're really looking at how we can provide training. We're training on LIPS to staff. We're directly working with our students. We're also looking at how can we provide more training to give like Orton Gillingham for our secondary staff, because to give them a sense of what foundational kind of reading and writing skills are required for all students.
Another big driver of our PD is going to be the results from the work that the literacy data team is immersed in, from a literacy aspect of it. One of the things we're also looking at is how do we support students in mathematics and science and social studies when we know that there's a language-based need. And so that will become part of the work that we do. And we're trying to, again, make sure that we're solving the right problem. So giving ourselves permission to go slow, to go far, and really letting the literacy data team work intensely over the next month or so that we can then develop a year-long plan for what that professional development will look like. Also, we're looking at how do we enhance the professional development for our teaching assistants who are often supports to some of our neediest students so that they become expert in the programs that match the student's profile. Because it's not going to be the same for every student. It's going to be really dependent upon what that student needs at that time. So these teaching assistants become a vital piece in that, because they're the ones who often have the flexibility to give those one-on-one tutorials to the kids.
And we're going to continue to make sure staff, we have a lot of staff who've been trained in social thinking curriculum, and we'll continue to make sure that any staff who come on board and are working with students who need support social skills development have that training as well, or information.
You talked about training for the TAs or aides in the classroom. What is like the hiring when you hire someone for that role? Are you hiring for a student or for a position? And what qualifications do they need to have? I noticed this year there was a lot of turnover in the beginning of the year with aides. And how do you attempt to staff for those positions? And how do you decide like who gets a consistent aide and who doesn't, and how many aides people are working with? That was a lot of questions.
The hiring piece it's done. It's at building level and principals, but it depends because we have programs that we need a certain skill set for, and so the principals look at and interview staff and try to hire staff that can meet kind of the needs of the students in the program, have some sort of background if possible, which makes the transition easier.
What would the background entail?
Right now, it's a bachelor's at minimum is required.
In education or anything?
It's just anything.
So two things, I would say, if I could just interject. Because right now, we're actively hiring 4 part-time teaching assistants for 4 very different programs. And so rather than hiring for each individual, posting and hiring for each individual program, we're looking at the applicant pool and we're looking at their background. So some of the applicants have a background working with high behavioral needs preschools. So if right now we need a teaching assistant for our new preschool class, we need a teaching assistant for our CASTLE program, which is our social emotional program. We need one for our intensive learning program at the elementary, and one for some students who have intensive behavioral needs at the elementary. So looking at those 4 programs, they each have a very different profile, student profile that they're designed to support. So then matching the applicants and asking questions through the interview process that allows us to say, okay, who might be better positioned? Not necessarily they already come with the skills, because that's not always the case with teaching assistants, but they have the mindset and the will to learn the skills necessary to best support those students. And then what we've been talking about is how do we bring them on board and have like a TA boot camp, the first few days before we ever put them in the classroom, so that they're getting some high-level training right from the gate. And along with, once they're in a classroom, they're always paired with teachers who are going to, as part of that partnership, are responsible for providing training. So that's kind of what's happening right now, literally, as we speak. But next year, what we're trying to do, going back to those fellowships that we talked about, is we're trying to partner with Endicott, Merrimack College, and Salem State to recruit as many fellows as we can, because in those fellowship programs, they come in and they can work in a TA role. We pay basically like a piece of their tuition, so it'll cost us like $18,000 to have one fellow come into the district. They're here from day one until the end of the school year. So that solves our turnover issue. And we tried to recruit some fellows last summer when I first came, but it was too late, they were already placed. So now January rolled around, they already knew we were interested, we're already in conversation. I have some resumes in my inbox right now. And even with the fellows, we'll interview them. We want to hear what is their skill set, and then we'll place them based on their current skills and their aspirations. And that's like a win-win, because that allows us to build that pipeline I was talking about with the Student Opportunity Act. It allows for consistency, so that we know we have these people all year long. And it also gives us a chance to test drive a future employee. So we're looking for special education fellows, we're looking for English language learner fellows, and some other hard to fill positions as a recruitment strategy. But that's just another way, because the turnover thing, it's a tough job, and they don't earn a big salary, but in this case, they're earning college credits, they're working towards that higher level degree, and they already have a teaching degree. So it's like a win-win-win, like a no-brainer all around.
A great program.
We've also had our literacy and math coordinators working and providing training to teaching assistants as well, so to help them with skills to support students in the classroom, their focus on academic or literacy.
I want to address, because you asked about the one-to-one and how many different TAs might work. So teams decide if someone needs a one-to-one or not. And what we do in the programs is we generally will hire a certain amount of program staff within that program, and then it's up to the teacher to kind of decide. But we do try not to have, as much as possible, kids only working with one, unless we say he needs a one-to-one for this, and this reason. We want kids to start to generalize, not necessarily with 6 people throughout the day. And if that's starting to happen, there's other probably different factors, but if people are leaving, quitting unexpectedly or out sick, which is the reality.
It sounded like that was part of the issue.
Yeah, we don't try to do that, but we also work hard not to have just one person with one child.
One during the day, or from year to year, do you mean?
Throughout the child's week. Yeah. It might happen, but we want them to be able to, learn from different people.
And then if someone's out, there's an absence or something,
Right.
it doesn't become a disruption.
Which is probably what is happening.
Can I make a plug? Is that okay? Okay. So my name is Michelle Bailey. I do have a student he's not on IP now, he's on a 504 now. But myself and Michelle Horrigan are both on the school committee. So what you've heard today is there are some things in the budget that are to improve for next year. We have been told by the towns that our budget is very high, and they are not going to support the level of budget that is there. The good news is the towns don't get to decide that, the residents get to decide that. However, if the residents do not show up at the town meeting, and if the residents do not come and tell the school committee to support this budget, we don't have the backing to make these things happen for our kids. So you really need to get on your calendar that on April 4th, you're going to be at your town meeting, And you need to get every single friend that you know to agree to do that. The great news is that Dr. Kuchenberger is in the works with the National Honor Society to have a fantastic town meeting day activities here in the morning and in the afternoon for the students. So I cannot stress to you, if you do not get this budget passed, not only will you not get these things, but the cuts that people have asked about will have to happen. And it will not be pleasant. And there are people in this room who have been through that experience, and we can tell you it's not fun. So we're trying to get ahead of time to, you can spend an hour and a half now, you have got to spend an hour and a half on April 4th. So that's my plug.
I got youth soccer pushed back and started in Romero.
There has been,
That's great.
lacrosse has agreed, basketball has agreed, baseball isn't started yet, everybody's agreed. There's like, I don't know, boys lacrosse or something like that, that's maybe a maybe. But you have got to find a way to get yourself to those meetings.
And there's a public hearing next week.
Yes.
On Wednesday.
On Wednesday.
And I've challenged people to come, and I have my 2 boxes of cookies, and there are going to be more cookies, so come and bring your children if you want. A nice 30 minutes, come to the hearing.
And I think that coming to the hearing, yes, and I know it's hard to speak in public ways, but even if you just write a sentence or two, I think people getting to the podium is going to send a big, strong message to our Board of Selectmen and to our FinComs that you're behind us, that you trust us in this budget. And what I always like to say is that no one's going to love everything about the budget. It's a really complex thing designed to do a lot, accomplish a lot, support a lot of various needs. You just have to have something in the budget that you can come out and support. And you can talk about that one thing. It can be that extra language-based program. It can be that PCBA that's going to be here in our district sharing our values. It can be the existing programming that you're experiencing with your child. Because that's at risk too, right? If we aren't able to have adequate funds. We all know that we're going to fund special education first, so we're not going to tell you that your students aren't going to have services. We're not going to do scare tactics because that's not true. But if we aren't able to receive adequate funding, that does get pushed into the budget first, and other things have to come out because there's only, that's my visual for you. It's going to happen. So we're always going to need our special education student needs. That's the law. That's what's right. That's why we're here. But then other things do come out that makes it more challenging for us to have the high quality programming that we're so accustomed to here in the district. So
What is the budget increase now?
So as of our last capital subcommittee, we have the increase over the FY20 approved, which is not the actual budget we're living in, because I think you all know we've been living within a deficit since July. But over FY20 approved, it's a 9.44% increase currently. We're committed to getting it below 9 by Wednesday. And while also still making those incremental improvements we talked about with the BCBA and the additional language-based programming and some of the training that we know we need, because those are preventative things. We have to do those things. So it's currently there. Like I said, the school committee is, I believe, I don't want to speak out of turn, but what I heard was a commitment to get below 9, maximizing some of the new funding from the Student Opportunity Act to keep, to move the needle, maintain current programming. If you were looking at the FY20 budget that we're actually living today, it becomes like a 4.5% increase. So the reason why the budget is so large this year is because we have a gap that we're trying to fill. And then moving forward, we believe that some of the investments we make.
How are you arriving at 4.5%?
Because currently, as of July 18th, we were notified by the outgoing administration that we had a $608,000 deficit. And so if you were to add, and we've done things, we've delayed hiring, we had 12 district level positions that we hired since I've been here, and we delayed some of those to try to generate some cost savings. We put a curtailment in place with the leadership team, all to try to manage that deficit. And so at our last budget forecast, we had gone from a $608,000 deficit down to like a $430,000 deficit. If the curtailment sticks, we believe we'll be able to cover the deficit with circuit breaker funds. So that's kind of where we are, but those needs, those unbudgeted needs, the 7th kindergarten, the 3rd preschool teacher, the 2 TAs in the preschool class, the almost $400,000 of unbudgeted out-of-district tuitions, and the $100,000 of out-of-district transportation didn't go away because it's a new fiscal year.
So the net would be 4.5%?
If we had our current budget that we're approving today, the net increase would be about 4.5%. And that's right on our website. You can see the slides that show that under the budget tab, or if it's not there yet, it will be.
It's not there.
It will be by the end of midnight today. But you know, that's hard for people to comprehend, and it's a complex story. The reality is, over what was approved, and we're working to get it under 9%. If we were to do all of the things the leadership team recommended, it was about a 13% increase over FY20 approved. So we've already reduced our recommendation. We reduced it ourselves before we presented it, but we reduced our recommendations as a leadership team by $1 million over the last week. But we believe still, with that being said, there's something in this budget for everybody, and we really appreciate your support in advance.
One last question, which is basically people who are not here that have questions that were not able to make it, is there an avenue for them to, what's the best way to, is it through Becky or I, or can they reach out to you all directly if they have questions about special education, programming, what have you?
I'm happy for them to reach out directly. I mean, I will give you my cell phone number and they can call. That's the easiest way to get me because I'm never really in one spot. But I'm happy to take texts, calls, emails. That's probably the best way.
Okay.
Whatever they're comfortable with.
Okay.
They might come to you first, like I don't know where to go with this question, and then you can direct it to us if that happens.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.